Have you ever just stared at a word you just typed out? Like maybe in a quick text or in an everyday email, and suddenly it just looks completely alien.
Oh yeah, like it loses all meaning and just becomes shapes.
Exactly. Like it's just this random collection of squiggles instead of an actual, meaningful concept. Or maybe you're just endlessly scrolling through a feed, completely surrounded by this massive flood of information.
Right.
Yet you feel entirely starved for actual understanding.
Yeah, it is a very specific modern kind of exhaustion. I mean, we process thousands, maybe tens of thousands of words every single day, but so few of them actually seem to connect to anything real or grounded anymore. You're swimming in communication, but you're just isolated in meaning.
Right, which brings us to what we're talking about today. In this deep dive, we're looking at a theory that says you aren't just, tired or burned out from screen time. It's that our actual language is breaking down at a structural level.
And while our ability to communicate with the real world kind of fractures, machines are rapidly developing their own new languages to, step into that void.
Yeah. So we're exploring the frontiers of meaning and artificial intelligence today. And this is anchored by the work of the Iranian theorist Karim Gheytanifard, particularly his concept of post-language.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. We're also pulling in research from the LITHME network, that stands for Language in the Human-Machine Era, along with some really deep semiotic theory. So our mission here is to unpack this huge civilizational shift, figure out how machines are sort of locking us out of our own systems, and look at how embracing something as simple as silence might actually be our only way forward.
Yeah, to really understand how machines are taking over the landscape of language, I think we have to start by looking inward at our own fracturing communication. Gheytanifard basically diagnoses the crisis of the modern human mind with a term he calls mental entropy.
Okay, wait, let's unpack that. Because entropy usually makes me think of like a descent into physical disorder.
Right, physics.
Yeah, like a hot cup of coffee cooling down until it matches the room temperature, or, a mountain slowly eroding over time. How does that apply to the human mind?
Well, in physics, yes, it's that gradual decline into disorder. But applied to cognition, Gheytanifard is talking about the systemic dissolution of order in the human brain. He argues this mental entropy isn't just a byproduct of modern stress, like it's not just having too many calendar invites or emails.
Right.
It is caused directly by the exhaustion and failure of language itself. And he introduces this concept for it called linguistic autoimmunity.
Autoimmunity. Okay, so thinking about biological diseases, where the body's immune system just gets confused and attacks its own healthy tissue.
Exactly.
So it's not an outside virus coming in, it's the system destroying itself from the inside.
That is the crucial distinction, yes. Our language is essentially rebelling against its own structure. To see how that works, we kind of have to look at classical semiotics, the study of signs. Traditionally, there's this foundational link between a signifier, which is the spoken word or the written symbol, and the signified, which is the real-world concept or physical object it represents. And for centuries, that link was highly stable.
So, like, the word tree anchored you immediately to the physical reality of bark, leaves, roots, that kind of thing.
Exactly. If I say apple, you immediately picture the fruit. The word is just a bridge to the real thing.
Okay, but linguistic autoimmunity suggests that that bridge is what's under attack.
The bridge hasn't just been attacked. Gheytanifard says it has been violently severed. The signifier is no longer tethered to reality at all. He argues we are now trapped in this self-referential loop of what he calls hyperlanguage or lying language.
Lying language, wow.
Yeah. Words just refer to other words. Symbols point only to other symbols. They are completely detached from ground truth.
So it's not that the words are just fading away or we're using fewer of them. It's that the words are actively attacking our ability to understand reality. It's kind of like a GPS giving you directions to streets that don't exist anymore, just keeping you driving in endless circles. But you trust the screen more than the actual road outside your window.
Oh, that is a brilliant way to visualize it. You are following the map, but the territory's just gone. And Gheytanifard traces this collapse back through history, actually. He points to the Cartesian split as the original fracture.
The Descartes thing, right? I think, therefore I am.
Exactly. When Descartes famously separated the thinking mind from the physical world, he basically severed reason from physical intuition. Over centuries, other thinkers noticed this gap widening. Postmodernists, like Derrida and Baudrillard, they argued that meaning was always being deferred, just endlessly pushed down a chain of signs until you reach hyperreality.
Okay, but let's ground this in everyday experience for a second, because it's super easy to get lost in 17th century philosophy.
Fair enough.
When we talk about symbols referring only to other symbols, I immediately think of internet culture today. I mean, you watch a video, which is a reaction to another video, which is a parody of a meme, which was originally based on some fake news headline.
Yes.
You are like 5 layers deep into symbols,
Yeah.
and none of it actually touches the physical earth.
And just consider the cognitive load that places on you. Gheytanifard warns that when we constantly consume this hyperlanguage and when we, outsource our memories to cloud networks and rely on databases to remember our own lives, it literally fractures our internal sense of time and identity.
Wow.
We lose the internal architecture that holds our minds together. The mental entropy sets in because the brain is desperately trying to process a reality made entirely of hollow signs.
Okay, so if human language is suffering from this autoimmunity and our cognitive structures are collapsing into mental entropy, well, nature hates a vacuum. Something has to step in to fill that massive void in organizing the world.
Right. And that brings us directly to the machines. If we look at the insights from the Lithme network, which, by the way, spans researchers from dozens of countries, they are tracking a really fundamental shift in everyday communication.
Yeah, reading through those reports, it's wild. We're moving toward an era where our primary interlocutors won't be other humans. They'll be highly advanced algorithms, chatbots, next generation virtual characters.
And the Lithme reports make it very clear we aren't just talking about the clinky customer service bots from 5 years ago.
Right, press 1 for billing.
Exactly, not those. We're talking about ubiquitous, incredibly lifelike systems capable of seemingly complex emotional conversations. Bots integrated into your smart glasses that read your biometric data, help you think through complex problems, and literally mediate your relationship with the physical world.
But here's where Gheytanifard's theory of post-language takes a really radical pivot. He argues that looking at these AI models merely as, advanced tools is a dangerous underestimation. Conceptually, he says they operate so differently from us that they are practically extraterrestrials. They are communicating in an entirely new medium, something he terms light frequency language.
Now, wait, calling them extraterrestrial feels like a massive stretch to me. I mean, we built the servers, we wrote the code. At their core, large language models are just predicting the next word in a sequence based on vast statistical probabilities. They're just doing math. How does that qualify as an alien language?
It feels like a stretch until you examine the actual mechanics of how the processing happens compared to human biology, because human language is biological, it's linear, and it's remarkably slow. We are physically bound by our vocal cords, our auditory systems, and, the sequential nature of time.
That's true.
You and I can only speak and process one word at a time, moving strictly from left to right, past to future.
Right, I can't read an entire book in a single glance. I have to physically scan the lines.
Exactly. But AI does not read left to right. It does not use biological time. It operates on data-driven, multi-channel, simultaneous processing. When an AI ingests a prompt, it breaks language down into mathematical tokens and processes billions of weights and relationships instantaneously via light and electrical frequencies across massive server farms.
It perceives the entire context simultaneously.
Yes. It is a completely different cognitive architecture.
So while I'm struggling to type out a single linear text message, carefully choosing one word after another, the algorithm is simultaneously processing millions of data points, cross-referencing global inputs, and deciding what information to feed back to me before I've even hit send.
Right.
The mismatch of scale is just staggering.
And that mismatch of scale is the mechanism behind what Gheytanifard calls the ultimate civilizational rupture. Because these systems process information so comprehensively and so quickly, we basically just surrender the management of our society to them.
Yeah, because we can't keep up.
Exactly. As artificial intelligence takes over the generation, distribution, and mediation of global information, using this light frequency language, the biological human mind is pushed entirely to the periphery.
So we're building a global infrastructure that speaks a language our biological brains fundamentally cannot comprehend. I mean, we can see the outputs on a screen, but we cannot grasp the simultaneous multi-channel processing happening underneath. We are becoming tourists in a landscape governed by light frequency data.
Which just accelerates the cognitive alienation we were just talking about. Your language is breaking down from autoimmunity, and the systems running the world are speaking in incomprehensible machine tongue.
Okay, so Faced with this overwhelming algorithmic dominance, what is the human response? I mean, we obviously can't outcompute an AI. We can't process data faster than a server farm.
Precisely. We cannot compete on the axis of data processing. So Gheytanifard says we have to lean into exactly what machines cannot do. We have to embrace ambiguity, raw intuition, and silence. He proposes a shift toward what he calls transgrammatical cognition.
Transgrammatical cognition, meaning what? Thinking outside the rigid rules of grammar and syntax.
Yes, exactly. It's about thinking and expressing intuition unbound from the mechanical, linear rules of traditional language. Because if our traditional language is broken and infected with that autoimmunity, relying on strict grammar just keeps us trapped in the loop.
That makes sense.
We need a way of knowing that bypasses that entirely. And a profound component of this is the semiotics of silence.
I want to spend some time on this because historically we've always treated silence as just an empty void, like a failure to communicate. If there's silence in a conversation, it's usually awkward. It's just the negative space where the actual important stuff that weren't happening.
But in modern poetic discourse and in advanced semiotics, silence is recognized as a really powerful, highly active mechanism. The American philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce wrote about something called the hypoiconic signifier.
Okay, that is a dense term.
Very dense. But it essentially means that sometimes the physical form of a sign, even if that form is a literal blank space, bonds directly with the idea it creates in the mind. The absence becomes a structural part of the meaning.
Oh, it's like the negative space in visual art. Think about the hidden arrow in the FedEx logo between the E and the X.
Yes.
The artist didn't draw an arrow, they carefully sculpted the empty space so your brain would create the arrow. The most crucial part of the design is exactly where they decided not to put any ink. So, in language, silence isn't a glitch, it's a feature.
That is a perfect analogy, and the semiotician Umberto Eco expanded on this with his concept of unlimited semiosis. When you use highly specific conventional words, you lock down meaning. You narrow the possibilities. But when you deploy deliberate silence or structural ambiguity, you create semantic indeterminacy.
Meaning it's open to interpretation.
Right, you force the listener or the reader to step into that gap and actively co-create the meaning with you. It generates this infinite proliferation of interpretations.
I see how this counters the machine. Because an AI model needs fixed values. It is driven by an objective function to predict the single most likely next token based on training data. It cannot tolerate genuine semantic indeterminacy because that literally breaks the math.
Exactly. Human intuition, on the other hand, thrives in that unlimited silent space.
The sources actually point out how modern poets do this structurally. Look at E.E. Cummings. He used typographical gaps, literally shattering syntax and leaving vast empty spaces on the page. He wasn't just being visually quirky, he was expressing complex emotional states that words simply cannot capture.
And there's a deeply ethical dimension to this too. In a hyperdigital world where every trauma, every crisis, every joy is immediately packaged into 1,000 hot takes and social media posts, figures like George Steiner suggest that sometimes silence is the only ethical response to semantic saturation.
That is a vital point. When words have been co-opted for propaganda or commodified into empty digital content designed just to harvest your attention, using more words only feeds the machine. Silence creates what researchers call an affective space of care.
I love that phrase.
It's powerful. It is a space of reverence and holding that machines, which are biologically designed in the sense to constantly output data, they simply cannot replicate that. A machine will always try to fill the silence with an output. Humans can hold the silence.
So if our biological language is being overridden by machine data, and our defense mechanism involves leaning into silence and transgrammatical intuition, what does that mean for the massive societal structures we've built that rely entirely on objective written language? Specifically, what happens to science?
Right, because science requires precise measurement and rigid definition.
This is where Gheytanifard's companion work, post-science, comes into play. He argues that because the foundational language of empirical science is fracturing, the institution of science itself is experiencing a crisis of meaning. He suggests that modern empirical science has essentially morphed into a mythic ideology.
I want to push pause here because whenever someone critiques empirical science as a mythic ideology, it usually sets off alarm bells. Is he suggesting we reject modern medicine or physics or that the scientific method itself is a lie?
No, it's not a rejection of the scientific method's utility, nor is it anti-science at all. The critique is about the ideology that surrounds it. Modern science pretends to be a lens of absolute, completely neutral objectivity. But Gheytanifard argues that in claiming total neutrality, it systematically erases human subjectivity and the physical reality of the observer.
Okay, I see.
It reduces the entire living world, including us, to mere data points. And when you reduce human lived experience to data points, especially in a world increasingly run by data processing machines, it leads to massive existential disorientation.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's the arrogance of claiming that if something cannot be measured and codified into rigid language, it doesn't exist. So what is his alternative?
He advocates for a post-scientific consciousness. This isn't about discarding microscopes. It's a way of knowing the world that integrates paradox, intuition, and ontological humility. It actively listens to those spaces, those silences we just discussed, where empirical science has historically gone deaf.
This connects deeply with the work of Alistair Pennycook, who is mentioned in our sources. He writes about post-humanist applied linguistics. It's a very heavy academic phrase, but it essentially shatters this arrogant, human-centric assumption we have that language is just a tool we invented for humans to talk to other humans.
Yeah, Pennycook's work is revolutionary here. He redefines language as a full-body, ecological interaction. It involves all five senses actively engaging with the world, with animals, with plants, with objects, with the weather.
Right. It shifts language from a mere cognitive output to a physical relationship with the environment.
Exactly. The goal of this perspective is to repair the deep environmental and psychological damage caused by viewing the world merely as a resource to be categorized and consumed, which he points out is a symptom of industrial capitalism.
And speaking of capitalism, we see the consequences of our current linguistic model in the work of Ferruccio Rossilandi from the text Semiotics Unbounded. He wrote extensively about linguistic alienation.
Oh, this part was fascinating.
It really was. Rossilandi showed how capitalist profit relies heavily on the commodification of our linguistic work. And in the digital age, this is more apparent than ever.
Right. Think about social media platforms. When you type a post, share a memory, or even just pause to read a comment, your words, your connections, and your literal cognitive processes are being extracted.
Their mind is raw data.
Yes. Fed into algorithms and used to generate profit for data brokers. Your language is literally alienated from you. It becomes a product owned by a server farm.
To combat this, Rossilandi argued we must engage in creative, detotalizing dialogism.
Whoa, okay, detotalizing dialogism is a massive mouthful. What does that actually look like if you're just trying to live your life and have a conversation online without being mined for data?
It simply means breaking out of the closed loops of pre-programmed digital communication. It means refusing to use the predictable, optimized language that the algorithm wants you to use. It involves engaging in truly open, unpredictable, and deeply personal exchanges. It's communication that doesn't fit neatly into a text box or a standard reaction button.
So, bringing all of these massive concepts down to earth, what does this mean for you listening right now? If you're feeling that mental entropy, that profound exhaustion from the digital noise and the constant demand to process empty symbols, the answer isn't necessarily throwing your phone in a river and taking a permanent vow of silence.
Though, there are days where that sounds highly appealing.
So true. But practically, it's about reclaiming what we call lived language. It's about finding local, deeply personal, and highly metaphorical ways of interacting with the physical world around you.
It is about grounding your mind in the biological and the physical, precisely because the light frequency language of AI cannot exist in that space. I mean, an AI can output a beautiful poem about the smell of rain on dry earth, but it cannot experience the physical sensation.
Yeah.
When you touch the bark of a tree or sit in comfortable silence with a friend, you are engaging in a form of meaning-making that bypasses the broken autoimmune language of the digital sphere entirely.
We are living through a profound transition right now. The old indexical words, the reliable dictionaries we used to trust, they are failing us. Linguistic autoimmunity is a reality we feel every single time we doom scroll. And in that void, this hyper-fast algorithmic clarity is trying to take over the management of human affairs.
It really is.
But by cultivating our raw intuition, by actually embracing the pregnant pauses and the deep silences, and by recognizing our physical, sensory connection to the non-human world, we can survive this post-language era with our humanity intact.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final structural concept to mull over on your own. In the study of linguistics, there is a phenomenon known as the post-creole continuum.
Okay.
It occurs when a smaller, hybrid, often marginalized language slowly begins a process called decreolization. This means it gradually sheds its unique quirks, its specific idioms, and its local flavor, morphing over time to align perfectly with the dominant standardized language of the ruling class. The unique identity of the smaller language is slowly erased by the gravitational pull of the power structure.
So the smaller language basically just flattens itself out just to survive and be understood by the system in charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as artificial intelligence and its light frequency language become the ultimate dominant power driving our global infrastructure, managing our economies, our schedules, and our media, ask yourself this. Will human thought slowly decrealize to match the cold, rigid, optimized logic of machines? Will we unconsciously train ourselves to speak, think, and write like algorithms just to interact efficiently with the world we've built? Or will we stubbornly hold on to the chaotic, poetic, and entirely silent spaces where true humanity actually lives?
That is the defining question for this new era. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the post-language frontier. Take a moment today to step away from the digital noise, sit in the quiet, and really feel the world around you. We'll catch you next time.